If you will take the podium line, go ahead.
Thanks, Moby. Moby in the morning, and I can tell you it was Moby at night that day, right? It was late somewhere. But more than Moby in the morning, you are a patriot, and I want to thank you for that because you're unrelenting in the cause that we all fight for in this great nation. So thank you so much. Thank y'all. I guess you love America, right? You're here today? Love America. Therefore, you love the Constitution. All this is all about today. Yesterday, I was in Washington, D.C. I was in another universe, and thankfully got to come home last night to what I refer to as the land of reason and common sense. That's North Georgia. And something I do on a daily basis in Washington is I get up early and I go run in the morning. And this week was a little different. I took a different path. And as I was running down the mall, I went by the Washington Monument that you've heard about and many of you have probably seen. Then by the World War II Memorial. Then by the Vietnam Memorial. And as I was going by it, there was a gentleman there who pointed out to me a name on the wall. And he said, "You see that name right there? He saved my life." And it just struck me. I was like, "Really? He saved your life?" He said, "Yes. He died in my arms after saving my life." I was like, wow. Continued my journey, went around the Lincoln Memorial, and then came back down the mall. And of course, there's the Martin Luther King Memorial and Monument as well. And it struck me that day that, you know, we have all these amazing memorials and monuments and recognitions. And why did they do what they did? You know, those names that were on that black and marble wall there on the Vietnam Memorial, it was all about loving this nation. It was all about liberty. It was all about defending us and our freedoms and the liberties that we enjoy today. But more importantly, it was about keeping us out of bondage. And bondage is a little bit about what I want to talk about today, because bondage might be where we're getting close to as a nation. So I want to go back to, have you ever heard of Alex de Tocqueville, a Frenchman? In 1831, he chose to leave his homeland to come learn about this great nation. He had heard about it, but he didn't understand it. So he left France and he came over to visit. And he went through a lot of the cities that we have. You know, he went through Boston. He went through Philadelphia, New York. He went all across the land at the time. He even came through the South. He went through Georgia, Mississippi, Memphis. He went all over. And when he got back to France, he took out his pen. And he decided to write down what he experienced and record his thoughts and his observations. And in a book that many of us have probably read, many of you I'm sure have read, and others I teach in school, many of his musings that he wrote then hold true today. And one of the things that he wrote, and I want to read it to you, he wrote this. He said, "The American Republic will endure until the day Congress discovers that it can bribe the public with the people's money." Think about that. 150 plus, 160 years ago, the American Republic will endure until the day that Congress discovers that it can bribe the public with the people's money. Does that sound familiar? Sound familiar? Are we at that day? That is the question before us. So think about what he wrote. Think about where we are now as a country. Think about all the challenges we face. Still the greatest nation on the globe. But that was something that was forecast to us 160 plus 7 years ago. When I was in Washington this week, I heard a member tell a story. We all get to speak to different groups. And he was telling about, he's a great, great guy, good family man, and how he was speaking to his children on the phone one night, and he has young children. And one of the kids asked him, said, "Well, Dad, where are you?" And he says, "Well, I'm in Washington, D.C. And his kid asked him, "Is that in America?" You know, we've got to ask ourselves sometimes, is Washington, D.C. really in America sometimes? Is it thinking the American principles and the philosophies that our nation was founded on? $16 trillion in debt. 41% increase in spending on welfare. Food stamps doubling in the last 4 years. Back to bondage. Starting to sound a little similar. A president who believes that we shouldn't have to work to accept welfare. And now a Department of Agriculture, your Department of Agriculture, promoting food stamps and welfare programs for the American people. What would Tocqueville make of that? What would our founders make of that? But more importantly, what should we make of that? As Americans, true believers in this great republic, what should we think of this? We even have the schools now, right? The federal government telling the schools where they can feed children. Anybody heard of that this past week or 2 or 3? I'm hearing about it from my kids. The trays, the 600 calorie, 700 calorie trays that you can't supersize. Did you know that, Mo? Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's more welfare, it's more government, and this equals less freedom. It equals less opportunity. The very foundational principles our nation was derived from: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is all about opportunity. The government is ready and willing to offer us the sorts of cookies, the cakes, the treats, the lures to keep us dependent, to keep us quiet and passive while it exercises its will. But the challenge for us as Americans is very simple. It's all discipline. It is our choice to leave these cookies and the treats and the lures on the table. We don't have to take it. And knowing that they may taste good, they may be, inviting, it is so temporary for the moment, but long term, it is enduring on the next generation. Now consider this, another European. He wrote this, and many of you might have heard this. He studied the life cycle of a democracy, from bondage to spiritual faith to great courage, courage to liberty, liberty to abundance. Now this is the life cycle. See if you can find where we are. Abundance to selfishness. From selfishness to complacency, complacency to apathy, apathy to dependence.
Okay.
And where does dependence lead you next? It's back into bondage. The life cycle of democracy, studied over time, it is held true each and every time. So where do you think we are as Americans in this life cycle? We're somewhere on that life cycle. It looks to me that we may be quickly arriving to that dependency stage right where our friends, the Western Europeans, are right now. They're experiencing it. So what's the next step after dependency? It is right back to bondage, but guess what? There's a choice. We don't have to go there. We can reverse that life cycle. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to right this ship? Because we can. That's the greatness of this nation, is that we don't have to stay in the cycle we're in. But it takes discipline. It takes determination. It's going to take will as Americans. It's not the next election. It's not the next president. It's not the next congressman. It is the sheer determination and will of the American people that will right this ship and turn this country around regardless of who is in charge. Now, Tocqueville was smart, and no doubt ahead of his time to recognize the perils and pitfalls that come with freedom and democracy. But he was also wise to pick up on another very singular trait about the American people. And this again is from him. This is from his writings. He said, the greatness of America lies not in being more enlightened than any other nation, but rather in her ability to repair her faults. It's not too late. Our final chapter has not been written. The pen is still in our hands. The best days of America are still ahead, as long as we force our will on the government. Believing that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness doesn't come from a government handout, no way, no how, but from the ability of us to be able to chart our own course, utilize our own talents, and live without the thumb of large, burdensome government pressing down against us, but rather a government that simply lives within the confines and the fences and the barriers that were defined within the Constitution. And I guarantee you this, we get her back in that box, America will flourish, we will continue, we will reverse that life cycle we're on, and we'll be back again. God bless you. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you.